you kick it off.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our virtual sites visit with the Robert Lince Earning Learning Center, one of the virtual visits in our series of virtual visits with preschool demonstration sites from across Washington State. At the Herring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington, we are thrilled to be partnering with OSPI and some exemplary preschools, on which one is here today to share their story with you. Guiding through our webinar today are two specialists from the Herring Center for Inclusive Education. Dr. Katie Bateman is joining us. She is the lead of the Preschool Demo Sites Project. Dr. Eileen Schwartz is also joining us today. Dr. Schwartz is the director of the Herring Center for Inclusive Education and a faculty member in special education at the University of Washington. My name is Monique Worthy, and I am an inclusion specialist at the UW Herring Center. And I will be walking us through the webinar today. Our project coordinator, Molly Lyman, is also here in case you experience any technological issues. So before we dive in, let's make sure that everything is ready to get started. As we get started, please test your audio in the bottom left corner of the menu. Throughout our webinar, we welcome comments and ideas in the chat. Because of the number of people participating today, we will not be answering questions or responding via the chat. If you'd like our presenters to answer a question, please use the Q&A feature instead. We will be recording today's webinar and it will be provided on the Herring Center Demo Sites webpage. The recording from today will be available by the end of the month. As we go through our webinar, please keep this webinar etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you are open to thinking about new ideas and willing to push yourself to grow. Thank you for joining us today, being present, positive, and engaged. So let's practice the chat. Please take a minute to share what impact you hope today's webinar will have on your school's inclusionary practices. We will be able to reference this information later and it will be useful for us in the future planning.
So let me turn on my camera.
A friendly reminder that if you have any questions, we will be doing our best to monitor and respond in the Q&A at the bottom of your screens.
Let's wait and see in the chat box if what impact you are looking for today from our webinar. All right, as those come in, the Herring Center team will check in on them and see what you guys are seeking out of this webinar. Here we go, Monique.
All right. The Demo Sites project was developed to provide educators from around the state with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in systems of change, and learn about how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. Over the next year, 4 model demo preschool sites across 4 different ESD regions will provide professional development to visiting schools. Our demo sites highlight diversity in our states. They include urban schools, rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with Herring Center Inclusion Specialists, the demo sites host visiting schools to showcase high leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demo sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive culture and refine their practices that contribute to equitable and learning for all students. There are some founding principles that drive our model demo sites work. To start, in every school, there are things that are working well. In education, we have the tendency to examine the problems associated with our practice instead of examining what's working well, why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things better. This asset-based approach is a productive way for schools to leverage their strengths to become more inclusive. Also, inclusion is not a special education initiative, but it is a cultural initiative. If we simply change the way that we deliver special education services without considering the culture of the school or how all students engage in teaching and learning, we will never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Through the course of our webinars, you will hear from our demo sites that are engaging in extraordinary work. What is exciting about these schools are that whether they are in year 1 of their journey or 6 years in, they all have plans for continuous improvement. They recognize that as new students enter their building and they collect more information about the best ways students learn, that their professional practices need to reflect that learning. Demo sites also know that engaging stakeholders in reform process is a critical component to making and sustaining change. When stakeholders are involved, there is a higher likelihood that schools will adapt and implement inclusive practices. Our demo sites showcase close partnerships between school leaders and teachers by engaging in true distributive leadership, learning, making decisions, and moving forward collaboratively. We know that there are systems in place in some districts and not in others. However, learning how demonstration sites have implemented high leverage moves can have wide-reaching benefits. You will notice that the demonstration site school leaders are involved in the webinar today. We just mentioned the importance of strong leadership and stakeholder engagement. We would be remiss if we not to mention the importance of innovative site-based leadership to support this work. For more information on the goals and aims of this project, please visit our website at ippdemosites.org. There you will find an introduction to our program and a recording of our goals, mission, and vision for our work to foster and promote inclusion across Washington State.
Awesome, thanks Monique. So before we jump in and get started, I want to do a poll and find out who is joining us today. So if you could, in that poll box, let us know who you are and where you are from. We have administrators, it looks like we have teachers, individuals from the ESD. Lots of teachers and administrators, that's great. From the district. Awesome. Great, thank you so much, you guys. We are excited to have you all and are honored to have you learn more about our preschool inclusion sites. So next I want to introduce you all to one of our 4 preschool demonstration sites, Robert Lince Early Learning Center, located in Selah, Washington. It is my honor to introduce you to the faculty and staff of Robert Lince. I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie Andler and Betty Lopez, who will introduce themselves and the rest of the Robert Lince team. Stephanie and Betty, I will let you take it from here.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to just switch over screens in quickly. And then, so my name is Betty Lopez. I am the Special Education Director here in Selah. And we're just going to introduce the rest of our team, starting with Stephanie. So Stephanie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Andler. I'm the Director of State and Federal Programs here in Selah. It's an honor to be with you this afternoon.
Allie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Allie Yupa. I am a special education coach and ECAP teacher here in Selah.
Thank you. Missy.
Good afternoon. I am Missy Jackson. I'm a special education coach and an ECAP teacher as well.
Thank you. Nikki.
Welcome everyone. I'm Nikki Gonzalez. I'm an ECAP preschool teacher here at Robert Lince.
So now you know a little bit about who we are. We'd like to tell you a little bit about our center. So the Robert Lince Early Learning Center is preschool, and this year is kindergarten. And so we have the opportunity now with a new building to integrate our site to have both preschool and kindergarten. But the journey that we started and the reason that we're here today are to highlight some of the practices that we started with our preschool program. And this has been a long journey in terms of trying and refining our practices so that we can configure services that are best going to meet the needs of all of our students in a way where all of them have membership and ownership of the classroom spaces that they're in. So we've been in a place for many years where we've had inclusive classrooms, meaning that they are a blended roster of students with a variety of needs. But this year is the first year where we have had all of our classrooms blended in a way that meets the needs of a diversity of students. And so our classrooms, right now we have 5 full-day inclusive ECAP, special ed, and tuition braided classrooms. So we'll get into, within this presentation, talking a little bit about how we went about our back-end funding structure, because that's one of those things that I think can make programming look a certain way. We also have, in order to provide a continuum of services, because we know not every student is coming in with the same stamina level or skill level and needs some different options, we have half-day programs that are a blended program of ECAP as well as special education and tuition pieces. We also this year have included some transitional kindergarten classes, which for those of you that's new this year, it's preschool but kinder transitional. So we're all learning together and trying to figure out how that fits within our programming. And then in addition, the building has 14 sections of kindergarten. So we are one large site of preschool and kindergarten fun. So our mission here at the Early Learning Center is really to work in partnership with our families, with our community, and the teaching staff to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the whole child and that we're producing relationships that foster that learning over time. And what we know about students at this age is that they learn best when they're with their peers and when they have models and they have opportunities to play and interact in genuine and authentic ways, that makes the learning go smoother, faster, and is more meaningful. And so what we want to share today are some of the things that we have taken into doing within our programming to help strengthen that practice. We are obviously still in a learning journey, so none of this is perfect and it's still evolving, but we just wanted to share our experience in terms of these buckets of practices. So one being our multi-tiered systems of support, the process by which we intensify supports for students as they're showing need. Another one is differentiated instruction, or how do we make that learning really visible for students so that they are capable learners of knowing what the instructional target is and how well they're doing towards that. Because we know if kids have the goal in mind and we're clear about how we get there, then they can rise to that occasion. And in this world of COVID, that's really helping us communicate clearly with our families as to what it is we're trying to do with all of the fun activities that we're preparing for students. And the last one that we wanted to highlight is our culturally responsive teaching, specifically through our dual language education program. So as a district, we have had dual language starting at the kindergarten level and kind of toe dipping into preschool. And this year has taken a more full, genuine dual language approach in some of our sections of preschool. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie to talk a little bit about where we started with our inclusionary practices.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Betty mentioned, this process started many years ago. We had inclusive classrooms in 2 of our preschool classrooms. We were approached through our ESD about an opportunity to apply for called Pre-K Champions. And so that is a program run through OSPI that provided opportunities and resources for us to learn about inclusionary practices. And honestly, excuse me, when I took over this role at the preschool, I didn't have inclusionary practices on my radar, but as I got in and learned with others and really looked at the research and what it meant for kids, I was all in. And so while we don't profess to be experts, we are super excited and honored to be able to just share our journey with you, and knowing that we're always still learning, we're continually going to be lifelong learners, and hopefully can pave that path for how we got to be here today. But for us, really, this was grounded in equity. We needed to empower kids to be able to reach their highest potential. And in order for us to do that, we had to take a look at how we are integrating and coordinating our programming. As a federal programs director, I live by braiding funds. And so Betty and I took a look at our resources and we said, how can we reallocate this to meet the needs of kids so that kids can be immersed in a more typical general education setting and have that empowerment to reach their fullest potential and have highest success in school. And so we're honored to be able to do that at the preschool level. So as we mentioned, our journey really began with pre-K champions, and then we began to have discussions and doing site visits. So I want to give a shout out to Hillary at Shoreline. She welcomed us and opened her doors to us and really inspired us at what this could look like here at our center. I talked with many amazing people on the phone. I talked with Barb from Central Valley and Carol from Franklin Pierce. Both ladies really pointed me in the right direction in terms of what could this look like. And then collaborating with DCUIF and their fiscal department and OSPI to figure out how can we make this work for kids? How do we coordinate enrollment with our slots for ECAP, for transitional kindergarten, and then how do we meet the needs of our students in an inclusive way for special education and for dual language. So we're very excited to share that journey with you, and also share a little bit of equity work and improvement science. Our district uses Carnegie improvement science to close equity gaps for kids with a systematic approach. And so hopefully we'll be able to paint that journey for you, and we came to that conclusion like, wow, we're doing this, you guys. When the pandemic hit, it started with a dream. It started with literally a pencil and a piece of computer paper that I pulled out of my printer, and I said, okay, fresh start, how do we do this? And so it was really exciting to see this come to fruition when we welcomed our little Vikings through the door. And as we move on, you'll see how the pandemic actually provided a silver lining and a pathway that just enhanced our program. And so excited to share that journey for you.
So last year, we started building the capacity, thinking about kind of 3 buckets of our work, right? So the first one is really taking a deep dive into our current systems and practices within our ELC as to what are our strengths, what are our challenges, and what's our current problem of practice, and trying to start really small about what can we influence as a team, and then how do we spread and scale the things that are going well so that we can continue this and replicate it for more and more students. So we started first with doing that part through our PLC process. We call it CSL here, right? We have acronyms, it's education. We love that. Our second set of things that we did is also increase just our understanding. What are some high leverage practices that we can put in place to really make sure that our instruction it addresses the needs of a variety of learners? And so that included thinking about co-teaching, as well as just how do we set up a preschool classroom so that there are UDL elements so that all students have access points to different learning pieces. And then what are some other sort of systems level high leverage moves that we can put in place to be able to maximize what we're doing. And so you'll see that we have pulled together kind of elements of different parts of that learning and made it our own. So it isn't perfectly one person's model, but it's a combination of supports that have helped us really figure out how we work our system more and more smoothly. And then the last thing that we did last year is see how other people are implementing it, because being able to see what's worked for others helps us have a tangible way of understanding how this strategy might work in practice. And so that was a really important part of our journey, and a reason why we wanted to share our journey too, because sometimes just hearing it from somebody else gives you another way of thinking about your own context. So Stephanie, I will let you describe our ECAP allocation plan. I'll pull it up here.
Awesome. Thank you, Betty. So this plan really started out with a scratch piece of paper and maybe a few that I crumpled up and threw away and started again. But we ultimately landed with this. And this was a collaboration between really our site visits that we went on, again, DCUIF's fiscal department and then OSPI. And so what we did is we took our allocation of half day and full day slots and really looked at it out of the box. And we collaborated with ECAP so that we could provide supports in a very systematic and intentional way. So on the far right, you'll see we have 2 of our half-day classrooms, and those are taught by our amazing SPED itinerant coaches who are on the call with us today. So those are for our kiddos who could benefit the most from a half-day program, and is mostly our half-day ECAP slots braided with special education. And then the second half of the day, they teach opposite and coach opposite. They can push in and support students with inclusionary practices and bridge in the transition to kindergarten for our students. So it's really unique and special to have all of our kids under one big roof, as Betty described earlier, and provides those opportunities to really strengthen preschool to kindergarten transition. And so you'll see in our full day classrooms, in classrooms 1 through 3, we do have a few half-day slots, and that's intentional so that if a student started out as a half-day student, they could then work towards a full day goal. So maybe it meets that student's needs best to start in a modified day and then slowly increase their day to a kindergarten full day. So we wanted to have the flexibility to do that. Prior to COVID, our hope was on Mondays to have a 1-hour social emotional class, kind of a pre-academic class for kiddos. But actually it worked out for us to resituate how we did things with our hybrid learning. And prior to bringing kids back in hybrid learning, we were able to have a 4-day-a-week class for students to be able to work on pre-academics prior to us bringing the full classes back. So super excited to be able to share this with you, but I'm also, it is specific to our resources, but I'm happy if you have any questions or if we can walk you through just the ideas, you might be able to steal pieces of this at your own site. So we're more than happy to share that with you.
From a back-end funding source, I'll say that Stephanie and I figured out that in color coding it, we could track the braiding of the funding a little bit more cleanly for the OSPI pieces. So just a little, if it helps you, that worked for us. So moving on, in terms of developing out our multi-year plan, again, going back to our PLC groups, digging in deep, what are our strengths and what are our challenges? Where is our starting point? What do we want to do? We came to this goal area, and I'll let Stephanie kind of talk through how we ended up with this particular goal and kind of the journey with that piece.
Thank you, Betty. Yeah, so what we noticed when we took a look at our TSG data was that social emotional learning was a great area for us to focus on. Last spring, but when we did a data dive, we noticed math was an area particularly across the state that was low, but especially for our students with special education. So we delved into a little bit of improvement science, which landed us where we are today. The goal on social emotional learning really was also stemmed from some of the trauma that our kiddos went through with the pandemic, and we wanted to be able to provide supports to them and to their families. So we have an integrated focus on that this year as a campus. And on our next slide, you'll see that we have our Viking pillars. This is our strategic plan for our district. And one of our goals is to have an equity-centered, engaging, and personalized learning experience for all kids. And so in order to do that, we needed to really focus on that collaboration piece around our early learning standards and learning progressions, and then the inclusionary practices, not only for special education, but for all students and for those in bilingual programming as well. So that was something that was really important to us as the Viking way, and all encompassed under that flagship of having a rigorous and engaging classroom, even at an early learning time where people might say it's more pre-academic. So that really was our goal as a district. So how did we lay the groundwork for where we are today? So I mentioned earlier that we really like to use improvement science, and the whole premise of that is really to investigate the system to truly understand what's happening. So a system's designed to get the results that it produces. And so we needed to take a look at our system to dismantle any barriers for our students and to really utilize parent and student voices to make the best program possible. So last year we had a focus on mathematics, and we asked families, what is it that we can do to provide the best education for students to access math for those who do have special needs? And so we took a series of our IEP meetings and interviewed our families. We looked at some research on culturally responsive teaching, on early childhood mathematics, and on special education inclusionary practices. And we put that all together and kind of created a storyboard for us. And so really PDSA cycle, plan, do, study, act is about focusing your effort on a goal. So closing that gap, generating ideas on how to do it. So using that data dive to really generate ideas that are data driven, that are research based, and that encompass student and family voice. Then we're going to test and build something and sustain it. And if it works, we do it in a small pocket, then we can grow it. And so we're so excited to be able to grow this as a whole campus for the pieces that are working. But after we did that data dive, after we did the interviews, after we looked at the research, we were able to develop these change ideas. And so it was really neat because what naturally came out of this was inclusionary practices. But again, when we looked at that lens, we were just looking at it with a clean slate. What is it that's going to make the best impact? And really inclusionary practices came out of this naturally because it's what's best for kids. So when we wanted to offer developmental milestones for families, so making those learning progressions come alive, making it visible for families to be able to partner with us, especially the pandemic was in a way was almost a silver lining because it really tightened our work. This was something that came out before the pandemic and right before, and then it just also helped us through that time of remote learning. So you'll see on there, parent-family engagement is a huge component or driver of closing gaps for kids, having developmental appropriate, learning to pedagogies for kids. So UDL, for example, and differentiation and having your multi-tiered systems of support. So all of those pieces can encompass that along with those rigorous and engaging classrooms. So using high interest hands-on activities for kids based on our primary standards. So we'll go kind of show you how that translated as we moved through the pandemic. So this legwork, that foundational work we did with improvement science helped us develop and paint our vision that tied back to the district vision. So making learning visible, using our standards and having clarity around our lessons, developing our IEP goals centered around those standards, and then strengthening the preschool to kindergarten transition through not only having TK, which is an awesome glue, but also that collaboration around our progressions, our P3 progressions through TSG or WA Kids. And we know strengthening our parent-family partnership was essential in that work. We needed family voices. We needed to build platforms to be able to hear from our families that we don't traditionally hear from. And then we were so fortunate to have all of these wonderful resources come our way. So we had definitely the Herring Center has been a wonderful resource. If you have a chance to apply to be a demonstration site, please do. It's been amazing. Pre-K champions, as I said, and then the 100 Schools Initiative, which is focused on strengthening the preschool to kindergarten transition. So as we move through, we're continually looking at our system and seeing how these efforts are changing our data. So I'm going to let one of our amazing teachers, Nikki Gonzalez, share with you a little bit about how we're making visible learning for families currently through the pandemic and as we have transitioned to remote hybrid learning.
Thank you, Stephanie. So as Stephanie mentioned, one of our focuses is on that visual learning and how we can make that mirror with our teaching strategies goal. So as you can see, there's a rocket ship and it has the color bands, which also match to the teaching strategies goal. In another classroom, we have flowers to represent this. So there's many different ways to do this. And so if you have your teaching strategies goal, target is counting. And so by the end of the year, you want them to be able to reach to 20 and beyond. Then at the bottom, you would have 0 to 5. And then you would climb up to 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and then 20 beyond. So this is posted, the rocket ship is actually posted up in my room. And my goal is for students to be able to take a little bit of ownership in their own growth and be able to tell you where they're at. And they can say, I'm in the yellow and I want to get to green. So that's kind of how, with the visual learning, that's one of the ways that we reach out. Another focus that we had was strengthening the family partnership. So one way we do this in many different ways, but one of the ways that we do is we create a video for parents. It's a parent tip video that I put together. And in this video, it mirrors the rocket ship image that I have. And I share with parents the different progressions and what objectives we are working on. Every week I focus on 5 different ones. I have the social emotional learning, the cognitive, the literacy, math, and physical areas. And in this video, I tell them what our objective is going to be for the week. And this is something that we've decided as a whole preschool team. So everybody's on the same page. And then I also try to give them different ways to work on these skills at home. So it's making that connection with the family as well. The parent video tip is a little bit further out as far as the scale. It's not broken down like I just did for the student where they do 0 to 5. It's more, this is the preschool, this is what they have in preschool, and this is what they need going straight into kindergarten. So I believe Betty is bringing up the video. And so we also do translation for this so we can reach all families. And that's all I have, Stephanie.
As Nikki was talking, I was trying to frantically pull up the examples of her videos and the different links here, which I'll let Stephanie speak through it, but it's kind of an amazing little silver lining of COVID, of being able to push us into the situation of needing to put together something like this, but that ultimately I think will be a very strong learning tool. So with that, Stephanie, do you want to talk through these plans?
Absolutely. Thank you, Betty. So this started out, as Betty mentioned, as an effort due to the pandemic, and then it became part of our practice when we moved to hybrid learning to not only capture learning for kiddos that might be quarantined or out of school for a little bit, but also for kids just to continue learning and to provide a platform for family partnership. So at the very beginning, we have a video of how the learning plans to be utilized for families to be able to watch. And this does go out in English and Spanish. We have a Spanish learning plan that goes out with this every week. And so as we broke up the 6 domains of the TSG standards, and we basically decided as a team what were the biggest impact strategies that we need to focus on. We know we only have a little bit of time with kids, and so it was important. So we delved into this. We broke up the work, and as you hover over under like each of the domain areas, there will be an activity that comes up for families and or a video for families to engage in based on the standard of the week. And then our amazing itinerant SPED coaches came in with a lens to develop a way to extend and modify the lessons to meet the needs of our special education students. So I'm going to let Allie tell you a little bit about that, as she is the brainchild behind this masterful addition to our plan.
Can't take all the credit. Missy takes the credit. I do the work. But each week, like Stephanie was saying, each gen ed teacher takes one area to focus on. They choose an activity, and then, all students aren't in that skill level. So we need to make the activity a little more challenging, or we need to make it a little more easier for them to still access the same activity. So an example, if we're working on knowing the letters, a modification might be starting with just the letters in that child's name, or even just the first letter in the child's name. An extension is learning about all the letters and connecting it to the letter sounds. So just making it more accessible to all of our students.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you to both you and Missy for your awesome work. There's just one other thing I wanted to share. We were able to incorporate UDL by providing a choice board for our physical activities to our families every week. And then our counselor also provides a counselor's corner edition for our SEL standard for tips and tricks and families on how to cope, family support services that they might be able to find, or just activities to engage in with their child to help them grow in their social emotional learning. So really excited about the partnership. Our amazing virtual teacher is able to also collaborate with us on this, and our dual language coach as well, to provide that language learning embedded in our social emotional work. So thank you, team, for all that you do to make this an amazing program every week for kids. So we wanted to share a little bit about how we braid our early learning resources and our funding to be able to provide a professional development plan to really enhance our program. As I mentioned earlier, we have not arrived, and I don't think we ever will. We're always going to be learning and growing. We want to be lifelong learners and do the best we can for our kids. And so in order to do that, we wanted to take a systems dive and always be learning and collaborating together on what we can do. So really our goal at Robert Lince is to develop a culture of inclusivity, not only for our students, but also for our staff, knowing that each staff member brings something unique to the table. They have talents and abilities, and together they are stronger. And so with that in mind, we're able to embark on the 100 Schools Initiative, which really we partner together with our Migrant and EL Parent Advisory Council with some local nonprofit advocacy organizations, and also with OSPI, in order to really strengthen the opportunity gap for kids and the preschool to kindergarten transition for kids, especially for those in special education and in EL or migrant programming. In our particular area, many of our students who are in our migrant program are also in our English learner program. So our Parent Advisory Council works together on that. And we have a special focus on parent partnership as part of our work. As part of our pre-K champions, we're able to really look at MTSS, kindergarten transition, professional development, and that systems level analysis and coaching based on what our goals are going to be. So in order to make this work and coordinate, we just developed this matrix so that we could see the goals is all one. It's all inclusionary practices and equity for kids, and how we can yield our resources in a strategic and timely way. So as you move down the page, you'll see we developed an action plan to be able to utilize our resources. So another piece to this work is we want it to be a foundation in preschool, but we don't want it to just stay in preschool. We want to empower and grow this program as it is successful and as its best practice, right? And so with a system analysis, if you find something that works, then we want to grow it. And so part of our collaboration is vertical. So having our SPED teachers and our coaches from the primary school come and join on our meetings, and we have a weekly SPED leadership team where we focus on our initiatives. Through that, we are going to be doing some coaching cycles based on some books. We are doing a book study with our local ESD to continue to grow our learning. And then we're also going to partner with some local districts in the second half of the year to continue our learning and just within our community. So we use this Champions timeline really as a resource for all of our opportunities, but also to make it simple and to triangulate everything to that one goal of what we're doing every week and every month for kids. So we're excited to be able to have the opportunities that we do and to be able to yield our resources to make the most impactful program we can.
So we're going to jump into some artifacts about that we use in our MTSS process, and to kind of just give you a little picture of that work, we're really trying to find something that would work specifically for the ELC. But one unique thing about the SELA School District is that we have grade band level schools. So we're kind of a mid-sized district, mid, small, mid. And each one of our schools is specific to a grade band. So kids are making multiple transitions between buildings in their career here. And so what we're looking at from kind of a bigger picture when we zoom out is how do we make each one of those transitions really smooth? So if you're at a particular point in an intervention sequence, that's seamless between the transition from one building to the next. And so we are starting that at our preschool, but also doing it, like Stephanie said, in collaboration with our overall district team to make sure that kids are getting what they need when they need it with the urgency that their situation requires. And so some of the things that we've put together at the preschool include the following artifacts, and I'll let Stephanie explain them.
So our amazing speech pathologist put this together as a tool. We really sat down as a staff, and with that culture of inclusivity, we wanted to empower the whole team that wraps around and supports that child to work towards the IEP goals and the development of that child. And so one of the ways we wanted to do that is just this artifact here, where we just articulate what each staff member can do to support whatever particular IEP goal a student has, and kind of translate or correlate that to the language standards of early learning. And so this document's really neat because our pathologist can sit down and with a team and say, okay, here is what our teacher's role could be. Here is what my speech para's role could be. This is what our assistant teacher's role in ECAP is. And so that conversation really took us into the next document, which is what we call a zoning map. So Allie helped put us, we saw this at the PBIS Northwest conference we went to last February before COVID. And we were able to just steal this tool in terms of really zoning on for kids. So what is it that each person can do at what time to target academic and behavioral goals for students, depending on what their individual needs are and or what group needs are. So really we could do this for a whole classroom. We could do this for an individual student. And this is just a tool to help us really be coordinated and articulate in the ways that we can provide supports to kids in a team approach. Every team member is essential and a leader in that child's life, and important to be seen as an asset for them and for our team. So that's one thing that we want to instill in others, is just that empowerment and growth for leadership. We also wanted to have a process for us to capture the data in the work we are doing that allowed us to move forward in a timely and efficient way, yet in a collaborative way. And so we developed a flow chart for our MTSS process based on data collection. And so this was a team effort. We sat down with our district behavior specialist, our school psychologist, our full team, and Betty. And we said, okay, how do we need to capture this based on what the data says about behavior? And so really knowing that we needed a solid tier 1 of MTSS with specific and positive praise that tied back to our matrix, we needed to collect data, and we needed to collaborate and include parents in the social emotional growth of kids. We decided as a team, if we're seeing that after that solid tier 1 of instruction, if we're still seeing a behavior that increases in intensity, duration, and frequency, then it's probably time to bring that to a CSL. And so we had some tools that we're going to share with you that allowed us to have a structured protocol in order to keep our conversations moving in a positive way. And also, this is a data collection form that we developed. And thank you to Nikki for making it very cute with the Viking ship. And what we did is we really took a document created by our BCBA and made it simple so that teachers could just put a tally mark under the corresponding behavior and the time. Oftentimes I did this as a teacher myself. I would take long notes and logs and my hand would hurt. And it really, when somebody wanted me to quantify the data, I was like, oh, I don't know. I just wrote about it. And so this is a way we could do a quick tally count and quantify the data so that we could put that on a graph. And then we have another tool that is very similar, except it's a scatter plot. So basically the time of day for a particular student. And if we want to target one specific behavior, then we would use this. So we would put X's, and the number of X's would depend on the number of times the behavior was exhibited. So this is one scatter plot tool that we use as well to collect data. So once the data is collected, then it moves into a team process. And we know that we need 4 weeks of intervention before we want to move on, because we know there's an extinction burst, that sometimes the behavior gets worse before it gets better. And that's actually a sign that it's working. I remember the first time I learned that, I was like, you mean this behavior is because it's working? Okay. But we wanted to have that protocol together so that we could learn together and keep it structured based on what the research says. So I'm going to walk you through just a quick look at some of our protocols. So this one was adopted from the Students Assistance team, and really we want to have that growth-based mindset. So what is it that we want to grow in the student, and what is it that one behavior we want to target that's maybe a safety issue or whatever it is that's going to make a big difference for that student. So what we would do is in a triad, or depending on, it could be an MTSS meeting, so it might be a bigger team, the sharer or the teacher would present what is the problem behavior, what does it look like, what does it sound like, for 3 minutes. During those 3 minutes, nobody's talking, nobody's asking questions. We're just allowing that teacher to have that full time to share what is happening. And then we have 2 minutes of a question and answer period where nothing but questions are coming. After that's done, then the teacher would then just listen during the brainstorm session. So everyone would throw as many great ideas as they could. And we use PBS World, that website is amazing to help us sometimes with our brainstorm. But we would just type as many different, or on a butcher paper, write as many different activities or interventions that we could. And the teacher at that point wouldn't say, no, that doesn't work, or yes, that will work. They just listen. And then at the end of that, then the teacher can pick one thing that they want to target and implement and try for 4 weeks. And then we move into what we call the plan, do, study, act cycle. So for what is that thing we're going to try? What is that targeted intervention that we're going to try? Who's going to do it? What do we predict will happen? And then we're going to do a check. So at the end of the 4 weeks, or maybe a mid time check, we would say, what happened? What were the successes? What were the obstacles? Do we need to modify anything? And then we would adjust. And really the premise would be to take those scatter plot data and look at what happened before and what happened after we implemented the intervention. And we have some other tools that we use just to track, just on a quick grid, like how many times it happens, so you can see in a visual way if the positive behavior is increasing and the negative behavior is decreasing. And this also can be used for academics. So this is an example actually from kindergarten that we ran first for our students based on mathematics. So what was really neat about this test is we were narrowed it down to 3 really mathematical progressions, rote counting, subbitizing, and counting objects to 30 with some very succinct and targeted interventions. And what we found at the end of the cycle, we ran it for 8 weeks with a 4-week midweek check. We found that kids actually grew, 9 out of the 10 students grew to the end of the year benchmark by the end of this test. And what we know, and so we were so excited just to see that how those targeted results can make such a difference for kiddos in that short amount of time. And so we know it works, and it's just an exciting way to be able to celebrate successes, because we know that those small successes develop into big wins. We get that momentum going of feeling great. And we talked about that as a staff too today, about how we want kids to feel those small wins too. And we want to develop that culture of and build their self-esteem up so that they feel successful and so that they know they can do it. It kind of turns into that, if I think I can, I can, and if I think I can't, I can't. And we know the research, what it says about having high expectations for students. And so we really wanted to make that part of our culture, is just celebrating those small wins and taking on bite-sized pieces to make a difference for kids. So sometimes less is more, and going deeper is more meaningful. So these are just some of the tools that we use in our MTSS process to help that.
So we're in year 2 in terms of kind of formal practice with inclusionary practices, using the grant pieces that kind of kickstarted doing some of this more in full. And so we're continuing to develop out our shared understanding through these different training opportunities, book studies, discussion groups within the ESD and within our team at the building. We're also working as a district level team of how does this work within our PK-12 system, so that students are getting what they need across our system, and where does the successes that we've had at the ELC translate up into the next years. And so with the opportunity of having the kindergarten building be new and physically located with the ELC, we have that natural opportunity to really focus on transition from pre-K to K intentionally, moving on, scaling that up even further as we move into the years. And so part of that is that continual process of thinking about what are our strengths and challenges as a system, what's working well here, and how do we replicate that so that it's seamless for students. And Stephanie, I wonder if you want to speak to any of the additional coaching cycles or collaboration structures that we've put in place.
Sure, you bet. So as a district, we're doing student-centered coaching. And so we're still in the process of really refining what our coaching cycles will look like. But we have some tools that we use, including the ECTA inclusionary assessment for districts. And we also have some great books that we can have goals centered around what students are achieving and doing in the classroom. And then of course the use of the zoning maps that we shared earlier, and theming the learning to around across the campus to ensure that we have that context to learn from. And like we said earlier, just breaking it down to actionable steps that are very reachable, that are small wins, because those small wins really add up. So that's basically kind of the summary of what we've learned thus far. And as we know, it's this continuous path for improvement. Just to sum it up, what we've talked about today and where we're headed, preschool to kindergarten transition, refining those coaching structures, and also looking at what is the best practice for dual language in preschool. So that's new for us this year. And so really looking at that, and so excited to see kids to be able to learn in their home language and what that means for them in the big picture. So part of our dual language work is not only in preschool, but it's really a P12 initiative. And what we wanted to do is really, the whole purpose is to close the gap for kids. And so this is a picture of our systems mapping in a way that we can yield both our parent advisory councils and leadership and our dual language leadership and our district pillar leadership in order to close the gap and meet the needs of kids. And so really having that platform of our parent advisory council with parents of English learners and of students in our migrant program to be able to tell us what is it that we need to do in order to change our system from their perspective. And this took us into a journey with a task force last winter and spring, where we were able to do a series of interviews with families and to look at that improvement science from a district scale. So what we really did is, again, like we did with the preschool, took a look at the research. What is it showing about sociocultural competencies, social justice? We knew that those were essential for closing the gap for students. Based on the research, we knew that outreach to families that have been traditionally marginalized in our country and historically was important. So how do we provide voice to families in order to meet the needs of all kids? And then what we really found out through a series of interviews with our families and through our parent advisory council in our Title I night questionnaire, we went through and coded and developed actionable items based on what the families shared with us. And what was really important to them was that community connection. They talked about how our community is a strength, and there's strength in numbers. And so together we can do amazing things for kids. And one of our parent advisory council members shared with me an analogy of confetti. She said, we're all different and we all come to the table, but together we make a beautiful thing. And that was really what stood out to me and what drives our culture work with inclusivity. So one of the things that came out from the system perspective of how to break down barriers was having classes for our families, having bilingual staff that were accessible at each building, building that cultural awareness and having that common vision with our leadership. And then together as a leadership, looking at a framework for how to have conversations about race, which we are currently doing with Glenn Singleton's work, and then really making sure that our teaching and our curriculum represents the students we teach. And so in order to do that, we have to work together. As I was coding our research and what our family shared with us, these quotes really hit my heart the most. And so I wanted to share them with you. And again, one of our teachers really shared that there's strength in numbers, and we need to see each other as a strength and know that if we work together as a community and a tight-knit community towards the common goal for kids, we can make a difference. And our parents really shared that we need to teach how they can help. And you know, before we didn't always provide the help in the language that the parent knew. So they shared with us, I don't have a way to know. And so that really opened our eyes to, we could be having district-wide efforts to provide really support to families in the language that they speak. And so that is something that's super important to us and part of the work at the preschool that we do today. So next steps, we'd still want to do research for our students. What is this looking like as a whole district? So not only in preschool, how are kids feeling as they move up and as inclusion moves up in that culture? And then just, again, utilizing student voice. So we did a parent voice with these parent surveys, but our next step is really, what are the students telling us and how can we empower students as they are knowledge holders and they hold the keys to what works for them, not neglecting that and seeing them as valued treasure holders that can teach us what to do for our system. And within that, really that continued family and parent partnership, again, summing it all up, making learning accessible, supporting our families, and by making it visible and centering our IEP goals for inclusionary practices around that in a visible way. This is a picture of our ECAP family support, had a fun shopping day with the monies we received to be able to support families with needs during the pandemic. And so not only meeting families where they're at, with the physical needs, but also meeting our kids' learning needs is our goal. So looking at that whole child approach again. So again, to sum it up, we want to develop that culture of inclusivity where all kids are included, valued, cared for, and loved, and that also staff are empowered and encouraged and known that their strengths and abilities are what make this program possible. So we're going to kick it over to some of our staff members today so that they can share what they've noticed and learned along the journey. So first, we're going to kick it off to the amazing Missy Jackson, who's an amazing SPED and coach in our building and ECAP teacher.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Betty, you and Stephanie did a wonderful job going over the nuts and bolts of things and the logistical side of how we got where we are. But what I wanted to share today was kind of bring us back down to the purpose level of why we're doing what we do, and kind of share with everyone a couple of moments in my teaching career that have really shaped my enthusiasm for inclusion. And so I want to begin to tell you guys about a little boy that I encountered in my third year of teaching. I was teaching a self-contained preschool classroom. And every day I would look out my window and I would see a paraeducator and a boy walking up and down the sidewalk in the school. And when I had asked about, now this is in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so, you know, inclusion, if you look back, has, and including kids in general ed really has surfaced and evolved over the last, I think 20, 25 years. But so at that time it was separate. And so I'll just say, I asked about this little boy. I asked his special education teacher, and she had told me that he had autism and that the parent would take him for walks during the day. And I'm quoting, and I hate this quote, but because they didn't know what to do with him. And seeing him every day with her, and she didn't walk beside him and have conversations with him, she walked behind him. Seeing that every single day, multiple times a day, sparked a conviction in me that as a special education teacher, I was never going to be seen doing what I call walking the dog. That I was not going to allow my students, my staff to ever treat the kids this way. So that's, that's one example that really set me forward in changing my way of thinking about, it's not just a place, it's not just a space where we keep them, but it's finding those ways to include them, because that's what inclusion is. It's about being included. It's about being in a place where you can belong, and then learn and share the things that you can in that environment. So then if I fast forward about 7 years, I had decided to take a position at an elementary school, again, in a self-contained setting. And when I showed up one day, on the first day, I was shown my classroom, and I use that term very loosely. My classroom was a 10 by 10 room where I had to line up the desks along the wall. And it wasn't a classroom, it was an oversized closet. But nevertheless, there were 8 students and there were 3 of us adults in this tiny classroom. And so you can imagine how the environment, the kids didn't want to be there. They didn't feel like that was inviting. It didn't give me, logistically, it didn't give me space to do the kind of teaching that I needed to be doing to get these kids going into their gen ed classrooms. I couldn't mirror any of the activities because of the space that I was given. And it was dark, and it was small, and it was lonely. And not only did I feel that, the kids felt that. And I believe it stifled what they had inside of them. Luckily, the next year I was told that I would get a classroom, an actual classroom, a very big classroom. So it was very exciting. And I did everything, all of us crazy teachers do, right? We decorate it. We put words of wisdom and encouragement on the walls. I structured it in a way that it was exactly like the other classrooms. We had our circle times. We had small groups. We had art times. We had individual work times. We had all of these things in place in an effort to teach them how to be part of those activities and go into their general education classroom and do the same thing. So what I saw in the kids was an amazing transformation. They were excited to come to school every day. They communicated more. They felt more confident because they were being allowed to do things at the level that they could do them. And that it just made all the difference. So I think that's, to me, that just was more proof to me that inclusion works, that these kids want to just do what their friends are doing, and they want to feel good about it and not different about it. And then, pushed me a few more years, and I came back here to SELA. And I got like the best job ever because they said, hey, we need an inclusion preschool teacher. I'm like, yes, that's totally my jam. So I got to carry out again what I knew worked, what I saw happening. And I set up my room just like all of the other preschool teachers did. But the only difference was the way that I structured my classroom, the materials and way things were presented to the kids, the modifications, the visible and the visual learning that I've had provided. It was that structure in that classroom environment that made it such that they could access what was happening and participate in what was happening. So I share this with you because I know as a general ed teacher, as many of you likely are on our in this today, inclusion can feel big and it can feel hard and it can feel just heavy. Especially with a lot of the needs of the kids that are coming into our school systems. But I think that the message that I want to share and encourage teachers is that inclusion in these kids and allowing them to participate is an investment. It's a whole lot of work up front. But once you get systems in place, it becomes that much easier for things to flow, and it doesn't feel so big anymore, but rather you start to see the successes. You start to see all those things that you never thought could happen are suddenly happening. And it's so super exciting. And I'm encouraged by how much our district, thank you, has gotten behind this initiative, that our teachers have been more than, they're very willing to help us carry this out, and understanding that it does take time and it does take grace. So that investment it's amazing. And I wanted to share that to kind of bring it down to the personal level, that it's worth it, and that they're worth it, and that you're worth it, because you need to feel good about what you're doing as a classroom teacher every day too. So let's do this. I'm super excited. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Oh, wait, I did want to share something. Sorry. I wanted to give you an example too of how we've sort of structured the transition process in our building, and with that lens of inclusion, kind of before we, as we were looking at beginning this process. So I have, last year, my classroom was an inclusive setting. So I had half the kids were special ed and half the kids were general ed. And, actually even less than that, it was a little bit lopsided. Nevertheless, things were happening, things were working, all great things. And then of course, coronavirus hit, and we came back, and it was scary to think, I didn't get all this time. I didn't get these things. I didn't get to do these things for these kids. And now here we are taking inclusion on fully as a program. What's going to happen? And I'll tell you a story of something that is happening. Nikki and I here on the panel share a student, and this boy started with us. We had visual schedules, we had tiers for weeks, we had very minimal participation, but we powered through and we put those structures in place. And right before we left in March, we started to see some fantastic progress. He was participating in our groups. He was sharing and talking and finally playing next to his peers. And it was just this fantastic thing that I was seeing. And then we came back this year. And so when Nikki and I were talking about how are we going to make this, we were collaborating on how are we going to make this a good transition for this little boy. So I don't know, Nikki, would you like to kind of talk about the things that we did transition-wise and put in place for him?
Yeah, so we actually, we got to have him a little bit before. Missy got to have him in her room. So I spent a little bit of time just connecting with this student. And then a lot of my entry into the classroom mirrored what Missy was already doing. So that wasn't anything new. So coming into the classroom was new, but what the routine wasn't new. And I can't thank Missy enough for the work that she did, because he started the year right where he left off. He participates in circle. He is engaged during small group. He's engaged during free choice. We're starting to engage with at least one other peer. Our language is just growing. It's just amazing. So we didn't lose any growth in that, which is amazing. And some of the same things that Missy has set up in her classroom, I kind of run the same way. And so those were familiar. And I think that that was part of the key to this. So it's amazing. And I can't thank Missy enough for the work that she put in. And I'm so glad that she can see what that growth was.
Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing those inspiring stories. Allie, another amazing teacher, is going to take us through her journey of finding out not only what this program does for students with special needs, but for all students. So take it away, Allie.
Well, thank you for all of you for being here today. I hope to have a journey similar to Miss Jackson's because she's a rock star here. But just to recap, Stephanie and Betty created our preschool program very articulately, breaking the funding so that there's a small number of special education students in each room, a small number of tuition students in each room, and then the rest of them are ECAP. And I wanted to focus on the big positive that our students are experiencing through this model, and it's simply just being able to learn from one another. Students with special needs are able to learn from peer models, and vice versa. Peer models can also learn a great deal from students with special needs. So one way that students with special needs benefit from this model is that they learn through observation and by watching their typical developing peers model that correct behavior. So things such as sitting at carpet time, walking down the hallway. Students with special needs don't always know those skills, but it makes it easier having a peer to look at, or even being like a big brother or big sister by sitting next to them or walking hand in hand with them down the hallway. It's a little more bearable for them instead of an adult walking them down the hallway. And as all kiddos interact, the peer models are also able to model social skills, foundational play skills, language skills, motor skills, and so much more too. And then thinking about the opposite group, the peer models can also benefit greatly from this setting. There's opportunities to interact with students of varying needs. They're very different, and the peer models, they see that, and oftentimes they celebrate those differences. Last year, I had a great group of students who were able to work collaboratively and ultimately gain friendships, which is the ultimate goal in inclusive practices. Peer models are able to learn compassion, being a buddy, like I said, walking them down the hallway or grabbing them a tissue if they're feeling sad. And they're also able to learn to problem solve. So sometimes we have students with special needs, they like to knock down towers. And, Peter, the peer model, he's building a tower, and Jimmy, every 2 minutes, he comes down, knocks it over, and Peter, has to problem solve. Maybe I could ask Jimmy to help me build the tower, or maybe I could have Jimmy just knock it down for me, or he can decide to just clean up and then move on to a different activity. So problem solving skills, that's another big thing that those peer models are able to learn. And then I think all kiddos from this model are able to learn empathy, tolerance, working collaboratively with others, and like I said, above all, just gain some lifelong friendships. You want to be able to look in a classroom and not know who is on an IEP and who isn't on an IEP. And our general education teachers have been so hard at work making this possible. And it's just such a positive aspect to our program that I just wanted to share with you all.
Thank you so
tell-
much.
You can tell we're pretty excited about the work we're doing. And that's, I think, one of the things about this is finding ways to keep that collaboration and that energy there, because once you start seeing that progress in the students, then it just fills your cup and fills your cup, and you just keep on going. So we are excited that we were able to share these pieces with you today. We, like we said at the beginning, we're still learning and evolving as well. So this is just one snippet into how we've applied it at our site, and we hope that that could be helpful in some way to those of you listening. So I think that takes us on back to the Herring Center to close out today's presentation for us.
Katie, you're muted.
Oh man, thank you, you guys. A huge thank you to the Robert Lince team who shared their journey of inclusion today. We are inspired by their work and can't wait to see what they have in store for us in the future. Stay tuned for our second webinar and our webinar series that will occur in the winter 2021. The Robert Lince team will present a more targeted deep dive into their implementation of their inclusionary practices. If you would like to contact any of our presenters, their emails are also included in this slide. The next thing I want to do is an activity together where if you could either pull up in another web browser or text 2233, text Catherine and the rest of that JBA 5842 22333. You can join in on this poll everywhere. So in one word, what are the systems, cultures, and or leadership practices you heard about today that support inclusion? We'll hang tight for a minute while these come through. So as these come through, what will happen is they'll show up bigger as more people answer them. I'm gonna leave this open and go to our next slide while people are answering this. And then when we post this webinar, you'll be able to see all this neat word cloud of all the different takeaways from this activity. All right. We would love to get feedback about our session today. Please take a minute to provide us with feedback that we can use to effectively share demonstration sites journeys in webinar format in the future. To do so, please click this link and fill out the brief survey through Google Forms. This survey is anonymous. Molly will send clock hour forms to those who were in attendance after the webinar today. Just like our demonstration sites are on a continuous path and continuous journey of implementation, the Herring Center also would like feedback to see what we could do differently in our presentation. So please fill this out when you get a chance. And then to learn more about the Demonstration Sites Project and OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, please visit these websites or feel free to email us at uwdemosites@uw.edu. We will be posting a recording of this webinar along with a folder of the resources and artifacts presented today on our website before the end of the month. So I know there was a lot of questions in the Q&A about some of those awesome artifacts that the Robert Lince team shared. So those will go on their website, so you'll be able to access them and download them. Thank you to OSPI for their partnership in this project. Another thanks to Robert Lince for your inspiring work. And thanks to all of you for joining us today to learn more about inclusionary practices and for envisioning how you might take some of what you learned today and apply it to your own schools. We hope you will join us for future webinars and that when our doors open again, you will take advantage in person of visiting our Washington State demonstration sites. Thank you so much, everyone.